May I add to that? In 2008, European Commission took a vote on the ICNIRP standards and voted overwhelmingly against them, calling them obsolete and out of date. If I may share with you a comparison, here we have what Dr Meara mentioned was that we have internationally agreed standards, and I don't agree with that. The ICNIRP would encourage everybody to use their standards, but many people have done away with them completely because they are obsolete and out of date and not fit for purpose. This is a graph that shows other countries in comparison to the United Kingdom. We have Austria, Belgium, Bulgaria, Luxembourg, the Ukraine, Switzerland, China, Hungary, Italy, France, Poland and Russia, all at well below 10 microwatts per centimetre squared. And here we have the United Kingdom at 1,000 microwatts per centimetre squared. We're not taking into account non-thermal effects of microwave radiation. It seems as though many others are.
Dr Meara, would you like to comment on that?
Yes, thank you. First of all, about the non-thermal effect argument. That is taken into account in the ICNIRP guidelines because it considers all the studies related to health and exposure to radio waves. What they find, in summary, is that the potential harmful effects begin to occur consistently at the same level at which heating also occurs in single cells or in whole animals. And therefore the guidelines protect against the adverse health effects, whether or not those health effects are caused by heating or not. They just happen to occur at that same temperature. In terms of adopting different exposure guidelines in different countries, in fact, all countries in Europe have adopted the ICNIRP guidelines through the 1999 EU Council recommendations. What some countries have done is adopt additional measures which involve further exposure restrictions applied to particular situations and particular sources in certain ways, and they differ from country to country in a rather piecemeal fashion. And when you read the governmental reports on these different standards, it's clear that these extra measures are not argued in terms of comprehensive reviews of the scientific evidence, but they are there to reflect the political responses to public concerns, so not necessarily science-based. And the view of Public Health England is that if you advise these piecemeal ad hoc reductions in certain types of exposures that aren't related to a sound scientific basis, that's bound to lead to inconsistencies, both for radio frequency technologies and how we apply regulation to all other sorts of things in our environment. In terms of the EU Parliament motion that was passed, I think you should be aware that the EU has got 3 official expert scientific committees, one of which is officially mandated to look at the health effects of new technologies, and it's called CENHERE. And if I think hard enough, I might work out what the acronym is. But CENHERE has got a mandate to review the health effects of emerging and new, potentially harmful technologies, and that officially mandated body has done reviews of radio waves and come out with conclusions that are in line with the international consensus and the ICNIRP guidelines. But clearly actions in terms of what it needs to be done on a political level are for the individual member states to decide upon. And the internationally mandated guidelines are driven by the science. And it's not clear in that European Parliament motion exactly what evidence they looked at and what was presented to them before that motion was passed.
Oh, sure, they have to.
Could I? Hang on, Rob. Does Dr Swanson?
I thought it might be helpful to add a word about how the scientific process works, because there's a vast literature of scientific studies on potential health effects, and many of those studies report apparently health effects. Science does not proceed by picking on one study and uncritically saying, oh, well, that's the answer. Science proceeds by carefully weighing the totality of the evidence, looking at each individual study, making an assessment of its quality, making crucially an assessment of whether it has been reproducible by other scientists, and then taking an overall weight of evidence using experts from different disciplines to reach an overall judgment. That's the sort of process which ICNIRP and the World Health Organization and IARC and other bodies internationally have done the Health Protection Agency, Public Health England and the Institution of Engineering and Technology in the UK have done. And using that sort of careful, methodical, weight of evidence approach is what leads to the conclusion that Dr Meara reported, that the place at which the evidence becomes strong enough to take protective measures is, broadly speaking, the threshold for thermal effects. And the studies that report effects below that level should not be ignored. They should certainly be used to prompt directions for further research, but they are not strong enough to justify setting protective measures.
Can I just go back to the guidelines?
Very brief answers, we're running out of time.
Okay, I don't know whether the other members of the panel are aware that Paolo Vecchia, who was the ICNIRP chair, actually is on record as saying that his guidelines are neither a mandatory prescription for safety, nor the last word on the issue, and nor a defensive wall for industry or others. And that their own commentary that they've published says that different groups in the population may have a lower tolerance to radiofrequency radiation, for example, children, the elderly, the chronically ill. And even if you adjust guidelines to deal with these groups, you may still not provide adequate protection for certain sensitive individuals, or with concomitant exposure to agents that exacerbate the effects of the non-ionising radiation. If the government are planning to put 30 million smart meters in different people's homes, you have to listen to what the ICNIRP are saying about these vulnerable groups in the population. The guidelines they have admitted will not protect against these groups of people. If you're putting them into everyone's homes, you've got to think about the most vulnerable, not the least vulnerable.
Barry.
Mr. Mitcham, reading your biography, I was interested to see that you work in information technology, particularly with systems development, integration and delivery. What's the nature of the systems that you deliver?
They are platform technologies for delivering applications and desktops.
And do the clients that you use, do they operate on a Wi-Fi or a wired basis?
Some of them unfortunately do, others don't.
Sorry, which?
I'm sorry?
Well, the
In answer to the question,
do
do
they
my
operate on a
clients
Wi-Fi
use
or a wired
Wi-Fi?
basis?
Some of them do.
Some of them do
don't.
operate on a Wi-Fi
Yeah.
basis. So you actually design, develop, integrate and deliver Wi-Fi systems for people?
I'm involved in the design, delivery and management of application platform technologies. Whether our clients use Wi-Fi is up to them. And what's the point of your question, please?
Consistency.
Consistency in what?
Consistency in argument.
How is that
I'm asking
in the
the questions,
remotest
not you, Mr. Mitchell.
concern with my consistency of argument?
Mr. Mitcham,
Yeah.
it's important that you're consistent in what you do. If you don't understand that...
I'd say this is maybe bordering on an ad hominem attack here. We're here to present information and evidence in relation to our concern about smart meters. What I do for a living has got very little to do with it.
Not at all. You've provided it to the committee in your biography.
I was asked for a biography.
And it's the expertise that you claim to possess.
I'm here as a citizen who's concerned about a smart meter programme. I'm not here in a professional capacity.
If you claim to possess that expertise, and that's the basis on which you're presenting to the committee, that's what you've told us.
I was asked for a biography.
Yes, indeed.
So I
That's
provided
what you
one.
put in your biography.
I don't have anything to hide in that respect.
Good. But all I'm asking for is a bit of consistency.
I don't think that's relevant.